Coming up on Fernand's live show Extra.
Across the shows, it was important for me as a fan to make sure that there were things in there that fans would recognise, and you would only recognise them if you were a fan, really. But obviously, she's got a mic pack on, so how did we not get it wet? But she actually wrapped the mic packs in condoms in the end. I thought she would bring something to it, that she would understand what the contestants were feeling, because she's a performer herself, so she knows that pressure. But also, I just thought she'd be able to soak up a live audience and respond to them, and it's exactly what we luckily saw on screen.
Hello, party people. Welcome to Fernand's live show Extra. This is a sidecar to the big show that is Fernand's live show, featuring extended interviews with key people in the industry that make the show happen. And I'm pleased to have one of the very key people that made Eurovision 2023 happen. It is the head of show, Lee Smithurst. And he was responsible for the editorial and the look and the feel of the show itself, from graphics, script, presenters, and more. In this episode, you'll find out how a 3D scan, prophylactics, yes, I'm talking about those good old contraceptive measures, and memories of old school contests really made this year iconic. So, here for your listening pleasure is my extended chat into the makings of, what's been called the greatest show, with the head of show of Eurovision 2023, Lee Smithurst.
You're listening to Fernand's live show Extra, going behind the scenes of live TV.
Let's go way back to 2022. You were in the green room, the points are flying in, it was going beyond your wildest dreams, you could come close to winning, and then you accepted silver, which was all good. And then a few days later, or a few weeks later, it seemed like you would be hosting the contest after all. Where were you when you got the call, and what was your initial thoughts?
I'm trying to remember where I was when I got the call, or maybe I was in the department, because I was doing junior Eurovision at the same time. So there were sort of rumblings of, will it happen? And I think, as we said, I think in the Royal Television Society event you were at, it's an EBU decision. So the BBC as a wider group had said that they'd be happy to host. And then it was an EBU decision to say, yes, you can. And then it sort of filtered down the team. But at that point, no one really knew what jobs they had on it. So it wasn't we've got Eurovision and you've got a job. It was, we're hosting Eurovision. Then you think, oh, I hope I've got a job on it. So that was the first thing. So that was probably at the end of July, I think, last year.
Brilliant. And I guess a whirlwind from then through to then deciding the next steps, which is then choosing the city. What was the process in terms of the bidding stages, and then what clinched it for Liverpool in the end?
You know what? There was a big process that was mainly run by public service at the BBC and the team there. And there was lots of different factors to go into the host city bids, things such as sustainability, the arena, the hotels, the logistics and the transport, and also how they were going to integrate Ukraine into their program of social activities and across the city. And it was very close between the two cities, but Liverpool had the edge. And I think if you were in Liverpool yourself, you will know that they did such an amazing job. The arena was fantastic. Everyone could walk to Eurovision Village, the arena, the Euroclub. It was just a great city that was taken over for the entire event. So it couldn't have gone to a better city.
Fantastic. Now, your title, head of show, 3 words, but all the more powerful thinking about it all, looking essentially after the show. Tell me a little bit about what the role entails, and what does it mean and what does it cover?
So head of show essentially is it requires someone to look after the editorial and take creative lead on everything that you see in the TV shows. So that could be the choice of presenters, the script, the set design, the graphics, the opening acts, the interval acts, everything that's on the TV came under my remit. And I should mention as well, Andrew Cartmel, who is the exec producer, who also for a long time, it was just me and Andrew on our own working together until we got a team hired. So it was very much us two just working in solitary for especially the first 2 months of just trying to get everything going and getting the team on board. But yeah, that was my responsibility, which is a huge responsibility. But as you know, I'm a fan of Eurovision. So for me, I've had ideas in my book for years and years where you think one day, if we ever get to do it, I can use these ideas. So it wasn't too daunting, to be honest, because it was more I can't wait to get going rather than oh my God, I've only got 7 months to do this.
Brilliant. And you mentioned about recruiting your team. What was the process in terms of from stage design to camera plotting to everything in between? And of course, working with Ukraine as well. finding that balance between recruiting all the people.
Well, I think the first thing we needed to do was, because we were 2 months behind in the process, usually, obviously, the winning country would start straight away in May, and it was end of July when we found out, so we'd lost a whole 2 months. So we were having to do a lot of things in parallel. So things like the set design, we were having to design a set without actually knowing which arena it would be in, which is quite difficult because obviously they don't know the parameters to what they're working towards, but you can come up with a general concept that then can be adapted. So that was one of the first things. And we asked various designers to send pictures in of what they think that Eurovision would be if it's the first time it's ever been hosted on behalf of another country. What would that look like, and how can you reflect that in the set design? And Julio's always said in his design that it was meant to be like an outstretching hug, which is why the stage comes out quite wide and it feels like it envelops the audience in it. And that was always his design. It was always our favorite one right from the very beginning. You just knew when you saw it that this is a special design that we could do. We could do a lot on. Obviously, there were lots of people looking for different reasons. There's budgetary reasons. And for me, it's just what can we do on this stage? And does it allow us to have the flexibility to not only stage the delegations, but also everything that we want to do with presenters are in enough different positions we can get them in the green room. And obviously, Liverpool Arena is quite small, and there's chats whether you want the green room inside the arena or whether you want it outside the arena. And I know over the years we've seen it come into the arena more, but for me for a TV show, it's so much better to have the artists in the arena because they're there. And if you're inside the arena, you can see them. And also for the artists themselves, they're very much part of the show from the beginning. Whereas if you place them outside, yes, you get more audience in the arena, but you lose them being part of the TV show then because they're somewhere completely separate that as a TV viewer or audience, you don't know where they are. So the set design was first in answer to your question. Then we started to recruit the team. So the key members were first. So directors, lighting designers, because they're all the people that would start building from the ground up their teams. Because once you've got a set design, then you can start planning, okay, what's the lighting rig? How many people do we need? And the cameras, what's the camera plan? And where do we put them to be able to shoot this set properly? So they were the key hires. And then we would look at the editorial team. So all the people that were on side for doing either the contest team, which was Twan and his contest team. Then it would be our intervals team. So myself, Dan Shipton, Tom, Rosie and Anna, who were part of that team. And then also across VTs, it's a huge team that we had to hire across the board. So it was a lengthy process as well, because we wanted to make sure that we interviewed as many people as we could, because obviously there's a lot of people that want to work on the show. So it was important for us to meet everyone and try and get a team of, a diverse team where some people were huge Eurovision fans, which I think is important, but then also people that just watch it once a year because they also know what appeals to that casual viewer that will just tune in on the Saturday night and what's appealing to them. So we tried to make sure that we'd got across the board people who were just regular viewers of it, and then the super fans who knew everything about it.
I found that key balance of the ones that do watch it once a year thinking it's just on the Saturday night, and those fans that know every single thing from the national finals right through to the end result.
Can actually get if you know too much about it, and I would say that I'm on the very high spectrum of knowing everything about Eurovision. You can sometimes get bogged down in something that doesn't appeal to a wider audience, because it can be very niche to just think of, the Eurovision fan base, because we know it inside out, but you have to appeal to, that big broad market. It's 162 million viewers. You have to tailor something to everyone rather than just one particular market. But across the shows, it was important for me as a fan to make sure that there were things in there that fans would recognize, and you would only recognize them if you were a fan, really. They're just small little Easter egg nuggets that were in there throughout the shows where it would probably only appeal to the super fans. But if you're a casual viewer, it goes over your head and you don't know.
Like that little Easter egg, and I think that's what makes the joy of the contest so good. It's like, oh, that's a great little thing, and so it's like, oh, what's that about? And I guess it makes it all more fun to watch.
Little thing that I asked to go in the script, which was, it means nothing to anyone, but as a kid when I used to watch Eurovision, they always used to say in the script before the first song, the honour of opening the Eurovision Song Contest goes to the country. And for some reason it just disappeared over the years and it never came back. But when I was a kid and I used to pretend that I was presenting Eurovision, that was a line that I always remember saying, and for some reason over the years it just disappeared. So we put that back in again this year, just for me as a nostalgia. there's so many things with Eurovision because it's been going for 67 years. Everyone has a little thing that they remember about it from growing up, or one thing that they used to reenact, whatever it might be. And we've all got those things, and tried to put as many that I could remember in of what made me excited when I was a kid and watching it. Even if it's just a key line of script, they're all things that make you excited and remember Eurovision. It's sort of like the vignette at the beginning. Everyone knows the vignette, and that's exciting when it comes on. But there are also other little things along the way that we enjoy about Eurovision that only happen in Eurovision.
I love that line as well. The honor of opening the contest goes to this country. It's such a grand line. It's like literally just one line, but it's so important. And it's really good that it's actually come back in this year. And speaking of ideas, you mentioned your ideas book at the beginning, and ideas book, so to speak. In terms of bringing all these together, what was the inspiration? How does it all come together?
Really early on, I sat down with Dan Shipton, who was creative director, and you'll know Dan. He's done quite a few UK entries before and other Eurovision entries, but he was key really with us on the Sam Ryder journey. And I asked Dan early on when I found out that I was doing the job, if he wanted to do it and if he would give up his role doing countries for a year, and would he come on and join me for however long it was, 7 months. And he obviously said yes, jumped at the idea. And we had a great session, weirdly, in his office I think it was September last year. And we just had a whiteboard and we said, what would we want to do in these shows? And we also at this point had a side for Ukraine as well, because we'd started talking to their team about what they wanted. And luckily for us, Ukraine wanted it to be a celebration of culture. They didn't want it to be somber. They wanted it to be everything that was great about their modern pop artists and their culture and their music and their heritage. So we tried to figure out a way of weaving things together without it feeling clunky. It's trying to find what we have that we can work together. But we had a good session in Dan's office on the first day. And I'd probably say like 4 of those ideas that we had on that day then made it into the show, which was amazing, because sometimes you just have one of those days where all the good ideas come, and then we would meet up the next week and the next week, and then we just wouldn't have one again. And then we just started to develop everything that we had. And then as a team, we'd meet up with BBC commissioning and we would talk through all our ideas. And we were very lucky, I think, that me and Dan are both so passionate about it that we would never pitch something until we felt it was really ready to go. So we didn't actually get any knockbacks on any of ideas. Yes, things had to be developed or things looked at to refine it, like in every creative process. But generally, everything that we pitched and wanted to do was accepted, and everyone loved it, which is great, because you always want to be in a position where the things that you really feel passionate about are on screen, because then you can make them the best that you want them to be.
You mentioned Ukraine, and there's been, apart from the creative direction, there was a lot of like show production inspiration and involvement as well from their creative direction, from the crew to camera equipment and all of that. How did that all come together in terms of finding the best of the best, essentially, and bring them into the show and embedding them as part of the production?
So in Ukraine, we from the very early outset, they were talking to the BBC about who would sort of be the liaison from their side for the Ukrainian public broadcaster. And it's a lady called Oksana Skabinska, who is head of delegation for Ukraine. And she was our day-to-day liaison of whether it be just checking things with her for a sense check. And then also she brought on a creative director called Herman Nenov. And he was sort of our key creative. So Herman and Oksana, we would meet with once, twice a week, and we would talk about ideas, and we would leave things open for them to come up with ideas. And we would also work on things together. So things like the Music Unites Generations, which was semi-final 2, that was very much their production because it was their music. They did everything themselves on that. We just facilitated helping them put that on set. And the drag performance was very much just our performance from the BBC. They weren't involved in that one, but there were a lot of things that we were involved together. So the Kalush opening of the grand final, the flag parade with the Ukrainian artists, anything that had a Ukrainian element in, we would be working on together. And we would ask Herman for his ideas. And it was a really unique experience, because obviously we're not used to working like that, and neither is Herman. You're used to being a small team that can develop stuff. And it was interesting to find different ways of working and how they approach things and how we approach things. And it was really important to us to make sure that their voice was heard and everything that they wanted to get on screen was on screen, if we could facilitate it, if budget allowed and things. But we would try our very best to realize things, even when it came down to things like costume, which were being made here. There's a lot of things that probably people wouldn't think of. So if Ukraine were able to host, of course, they'd be making everything themselves and they'd be making the costumes, but we couldn't really, because they didn't have a big team as such. We had a whole costume team who were making outfits for everything for the shows. So they would then have to make the outfits for the Ukrainian interval acts too. And obviously there's a lot of, with the Ukrainian tapestry and embroidery and things, it's very specific in what it looks like. So we'd have to bring on an ethnographer to make sure that we were using the right materials and patterns. And so it was quite a complex process of making clothes here, but with Ukrainian design. So there were all those little things that we had to work out along the way. And it was only when you started to develop things, you go, oh, your little roadblock goes, oh, how do we do this bit? But it was an interesting way of working. And Freckle Sky was another interesting piece, because Freckle Sky are a Ukrainian company, a multimedia company, and they're based in Ukraine, but some of them are based in Chicago in the US now. And they've done a lot of work. I've seen them do it. The reason I knew about them is because they'd done Pink at the Brit Awards, and they'd done a few things on America's Got Talent that I'd seen and really liked, but never been able to use them on any other show. And then when this opportunity came up, I called Val, who's a CEO or co-founder of Freckle Sky, and said, would you be interested? We're making Eurovision on behalf of Ukraine. And he said yes straight away. And then we developed that whole process with Freckle Sky and Herman at UAPBC. But there was a lot of things that were quite tricky, because ordinarily we had to build the LED boxes here in the UK in Liverpool for us to rehearse with, but we couldn't get them to Ukraine. So the Ukrainians would have to build in a warehouse. They would build the white boxes and project onto them so they'd be able to map their content and be able to rehearse with it properly. So there were lots of things that we were having to do twice, and it's quite difficult to obviously fly them in and out all the time. So we flew the Ukrainian team and the team from the US in 2 weeks before to Liverpool to rehearse. They had 5 hours on set, and then they all flew back again, and then they came back for the contest week. So there's a lot of things that you sort of worry about as the weeks go on, thinking, is this enough time? They're only flying in and out. Ordinarily, they could have just been in an offsite in the UK, but you can't really do that when people don't live here, to keep them here for sort of 4 weeks in hotels, and just budgetary and for their own time as well. You can't just keep them here for 4 weeks hanging around. So logistical issues were sort of all over the place, but they were all things that we could work through. It's just, it was challenging in that respect to sometimes find, how we could make things work, because what might be easy here becomes harder when you've got people in 2 different countries too.
Quite the year to be involved in as well. Like, okay, so first Eurovision, to actually take care of things, and logistical things of an international scale. You mentioned the interesting way of working and so-called ups and downs of production. Were there any other challenging parts of making the show? Like, I remember you mentioned the RTS event, the Netta's Wings, and how that panned out.
Yeah, there were lots of little things like that. So Netta's Wings, I'll explain that we didn't have any, the roof was, one of the weight loading in the roof was at capacity, and we didn't have any space in there. And when we knew we wanted Netta to fly, there weren't many points in the roof where we could do that from. We found some space above the oval stage where we could put 3 winch points in. So the bird had to be made to fit onto 3 winch points, but it couldn't live up there the whole time because it was too big and we couldn't disguise it. So the bird had to be made sort of in 3 parts. So the body was always in the roof in the black box, but the wings would then attach to it. So before Netta goes up, the body comes down on the winches, the wings attach on, Netta gets on, and then she goes up in the roof for, I think, 5 minutes before she actually performs. And there were loads of other things with that performance, tiny things, but Netta had to wear a harness to be clipped onto the bird. And that has to be so precise that, how big the harness is and how it attaches. But she was in Israel, so we had an issue of, okay, so because we could ask her to just measure herself like you would with a tape measure, but if it's wrong and she gets here, then that's quite a big issue because of health and safety of her going up on the bird. So we asked Netta to have a 3D body scan, which she did in Israel. So we actually had a 3D model of Netta rotated round, so we could see exactly how big we needed to make the harness to be able to fit around her. So it was all interesting things that sometimes it's just those little hurdles that you come to where if it was this country, we'd just say, can you go to this place to get measurements and we can do a harness for you? But we weren't able to do that in some of these instances. And so it just made it trickier. And Cornelia Jacobs as well. It was actually Cornelia's idea to have the water on stage. And it's always tricky with water anyway, because of the live mic. She was singing live. and the lights that were around the satellite stage, but we really wanted to make it work. And we were just trying to find solutions of how can she sing live, but also be in water. And she wasn't submerged in it, but obviously she's got a mic pack on. So how did we not get it wet? But she actually wrapped the mic packs in condoms in the end as a surefire way to keep them dry. So there's always, this show has taught me more than anything. And I always think this, I always think there's a solution to everything. I never really give up on anything, but this has taught me more so than any other show that I've done, that there's always a way around. I don't feel like across the course of the thing there was anything we couldn't do just because we couldn't make it work. Yes, some things because of money, but never because of something logistical or a reason like that we couldn't make something work. We always pushed to do things.
That's brilliant. Innovation on even the most primal levels to actually make things work, which is brilliant. The hosts, a bit of an inspired choice. You've got three musical superstar talents. Both on stage, of course, on screen, and the legend that is, of course, Graham Norton. How did this foursome of sorts come together?
We started to put names down quite early on in the year of who we would like. And obviously there's loads of names at the beginning of who you would like. And I'm always of the belief that when you get something of this scale, you sometimes want to have a little surprise in there. And I remember when Ulrika and Terry were announced for Birmingham 98, I think Ulrika was such a surprising choice because she wasn't particularly maybe a BBC name. She was doing Gladiators on ITV, but she was a name that appealed to everyone. And I was trying to think of who would be good to do Eurovision. And in my experience, all the, you know, people that I like Petra, who've brought something extra to it, I was thinking who would that be in the UK? And it didn't feel like there was particularly a presenter that jumped out that would be able to do that. And then the reason that I thought of Hannah to put into the mix is because she'd done a lot of live theatre. She's internationally well known from all the shows she's been in, like Game of Thrones and Emmy Award winning for Ted Lasso. And she can also sing. So for me, I thought she would bring something to it, that she would understand what the contestants were feeling because she's a performer herself. So she knows that pressure. But also, I just thought she'd be able to soak up a live audience and respond to them. And it's exactly what we luckily saw on screen, which is she was so charismatic on the camera, and it felt like you saw every emotion she had because they were all there for you to see. When she was excited, when, you know, there was things when in the results where you can tell that she's empathizing with people when they haven't got through and she has to deliver, you know, those televote scores. And I think she just had a whole range of everything that was brilliant about Eurovision. She was celebratory of it. She was very much in the moment in every single show, as were Alicia and Julia. But Hannah was it unknown, really, because she hasn't done anything like this before. And yes, she's a great actress and performer, but you don't know if someone can present until they get on stage.
Brilliant stuff. And yeah, a really inspired choice. As a result, the fandom absolutely love her. So yeah, pretty good idea, I must say. Going back to 1998, you mentioned, of course, that year. It was a bit of an interesting year for you because it involves a running order and the UK's entry at the time.
That's true. So one of my very first jobs when I was at uni was on the National Lottery shows where they used to preview the UK Eurovision songs. And I was a big fan at that time. And I can't remember if I was looking after Imani or whether she was just there, but I'd got the script, so the big sort of show script for the day, for the live show on the Saturday night, and she signed the back of it and she said something like to Lee, "Enjoy Eurovision, much love, Imani." So it was a real weird moment, actually, of, you know, 25 years later, you think, God, I never thought this would happen, that this would be the trajectory of that meeting. But, you know, I've been a fan, well, since way before then, but I never really thought that it would happen. Eurovision probably inspired me to get into TV, but then because I've done so many shows over the years, like Eurovision's just been a passion for me until I got to work on it myself. So it was always something that I wanted to do, but it sort of just took a different trajectory when I started in TV, and then I did all the other different sort of Saturday night shows, and Eurovision just came up a few years ago for me to be able to do myself. So that was my first sort of foray, really.
Brilliant. I share the same sentiments in terms of getting into TV because of Eurovision, and yeah, I guess the interesting tale of 25 years later, actually all this. So that's actually really, really insightful. Working with the EBU and colleagues of previous years, you mentioned Twana, and a whole bunch of other colleagues from the Netherlands and Sweden and all that have been involved. Did they give you any tips in terms of, okay, this is your show, how to do it?
Martin Erstedal said at the beginning, I think it was Martin anyway, that time is never on your side, which was the best tip actually, because, well, it didn't really help because it wasn't, but there's never a true word spoken because you're always sort of 2 or 3 weeks behind where you need to be. And I think that's the key, that if we ever were to do it again, you would learn not to spend so much time on particular things. It feels like once you get into the rhythm of it, things are so much quicker than you're used to because you have to sort of keep things going and move it through. But at the beginning, especially in sort of September, October time, when you do feel like you've got the luxury of, oh, it's in May next year, you do take time to make decisions, especially on like the set design, and you refine it till it's right. But then you find the decisions that you make later on in February and March are, what is it? Quick, go, sign off, done. Can everyone look at this and sign it off by, Thursday? So it does move much quicker when you get into the year, which I think is natural on anything as soon as you get closer to the deadline. But yeah, that was some advice from Martin. And then Twan, obviously I've known Twan for a couple of years since he's been head of contest when I've been on the UK team. And it was really important, I think, for both myself and Andrew. I was in Amsterdam in August, and me and Twan had lunch together. And at that point, I didn't know what my role would be. And I said, look, if I'm doing this, would you want to do it as head of contest? So there's lots of other people to sign this off, but it would be great if you could. I said, me and Andrew would really love you to do it because we're behind anyway. So it would be great if we have someone that knows that side of it, so we don't have to think about it, because someone can come on and do that. And luckily for us, he said yes. And he's brilliant. And I think I speak for, I hope I speak for the other countries as well. Twan is so fair and he's so accommodating that when you're a head of delegation, you want to make sure that you're getting the best for your artist. And Twan, you always know that he's going above and beyond. And if he says something can't happen, we know that he's tried to make it happen, which is great. And I think all the countries respect Twan. So we did feel that when he said yes, a lot of countries would be quite happy with that, because they've built a relationship with him over the last couple of years. And that's important, especially when you're trying to get your best for your artist, because a lot of the teams in the country stay the same from the broadcasters, but obviously every country gets a new artist every year, which comes with new management who don't know the process. So if you can have someone that you trust like Twan at the center, who you have to liaise with to get what you want for your on-stage performance, it's a big difference.
Absolutely. Are there any other sort of nerdy production facts and figures and Easter eggs that are in the show, whether it's from you or just within the general populace of, if you blink, you miss it kind of thing?
Good question. Probably noticed some of the things anyway in the shows. I wanted to put a leaderboard in because I feel like Martin had said lots of various things over the course of the process, Martin Erstedal, of what we could try and think of. And there are things in Eurovision that you'll probably know yourself, that it's hard to get to know the artists as you would on those shows like Dancing with the Stars, Strictly Come Dancing, because there's not 16 weeks to get to know someone. And especially in the Melfest and things, you can see them over the weeks and they come back for the final. But in Eurovision, it's one night or 3 nights, but you don't really get to feel like you know the artists that much. And he asked if there's any way that we could try and get to know the artists more. And also, Eurovision is a heritage brand. So while we don't want to look back and Eurovision is moving forward, it's still a place where you can celebrate its history. And how could we do that? And I thought the leaderboard was an important thing to do at the top of the final, because I don't feel like you ever really see that. So if you come to Eurovision new, like on the Olympics, you see every year the current medal table and where people are, and you see it for the current year you're in. And they also go, look at over time how many medals, United States have won or Japan have won. But it's never really done in Eurovision. So it's nice to do a leaderboard. And actually the leaderboard was already there even before we knew Luxembourg was coming back. So that was a nice little thing to add on at the very end, which made sense and an editorial sense. So little things like that we wanted to put in. And I can't think of anything else. There's probably lots of Easter eggs, but off the top of my head, I can't think of any other ones that you might or might not have noticed.
Fantastic. And looking back now, did you think that working on Eurovision would have been anything like you experienced?
It was a lot. It was a lot more tiring than I thought, put it that way. But mentally tiring, not physically. So when we went there, I think 5 weeks before the live shows, and we didn't have a day off. But those things don't matter because you're running on adrenaline and you don't really want to be off anyway in a hotel room. Sometimes it's nice to have a little lie in, but once you're there, you want to work anyway. It's exciting, but it was mentally challenging because we had, especially for me and Andrew, who were across most of the shows, you can be thinking about VTs, you can think thinking about scripts, you can be thinking about the performance or the set that, you know, when it's being built, so things might go wrong with it, and the voting, and there's so many different elements to think about that. What I didn't prepare for is that my brain would never switch off, even when I was at home. So I sort of, you know, I love it, but you give up your life for especially the last sort of 3 or 4 months, because you don't really have the capacity to take any more in your head. And me and Andrew we found it funny in the end, but we'd be in the office together at 9 o'clock at night, and in the BBC television centre, the lights go off if you don't move around. But we would have this joke every night that we were 2 sad sacks there at 9, 10 o'clock at night when everyone else had gone, and we just, for us, because we were in so many meetings all day, that when you finish at 6, that's when your sort of work starts, where you can look back on everything that you might have not been able to respond to during the day. So we'd be there many nights to like 9, 10 o'clock on our own, eating our dinner there, and then the lights going off. But it was so worth it. There's a period, obviously, where you just want to get to the arena, because it's quite, you know, tough to be in the office and you're just thinking of things, but nothing's actually being implemented. So once we got to Liverpool, it was amazing. What an amazing experience to be part of. And I think that everyone on the team really enjoyed it. We got to the Sunday and people were really tired, but people didn't actually want to go home. Usually after a big job like that, all you want to do is get home, switch off, and that's it. Especially when you've been living in a hotel where you don't have your own comforts, you can't wash your own clothes, you can't cook for yourself. But no, I think people were really sad to go home, because we'd got cabin fever. We'd been there for so long together, and every day's exciting. We're either rehearsing the interval acts at the beginning or rehearsing the countries with stand-ins. Then the countries arrive themselves and you get to see them come alive. Then the presenters arrive, and then you're into your live show. So yeah, brilliant experience.
Fantastic. And what a way to end. Thank you so much for, I must say, a mind-blown insight into the contest. It's been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
You're listening to Fernand's Live Show Extra, going behind the scenes of live TV.
A fantastic insight into a creative mind. That was Lee Smithurst, showing the magic behind the sparkle and glitter of an incredible show. If this has just whetted your appetite into the makings of the production, do check out my full deep dive into how they made this year's behemoth of a song competition. Please do give us a like and subscribe, or follow wherever you're listening, and follow me on all the socials. That's at Fernand's Live Show. Until next time, remember, always hit record and stay live. Peace.